We knew very little about the Qin Empire until the Terracotta Army was uncovered. Suddenly, you find this incredible evidence of what the soldiers wore, what their military technology was like.
For decades, the Terracotta Army was considered a closed case. Every pit was mapped, every formation was explained.
The terracotta warriors, they're totally exceptional and unique in Chinese history, but these kind of really highly complex human figures, life-size, that's something we haven't seen before.
Every major discovery seemed long finished, but that confidence collapsed inside Pit 2. Archaeologists have just uncovered a Terracotta Army commander unlike anything ever found on the site.
I work in this site for many years, so these warriors are all life-sized, like real soldiers. One day, a group of farmers digging well here, and they find some pieces of the portrait.
The deeper they dug, the stranger it became. The find shocked the excavation team and has forced historians to question the foundations of China's earliest military history. The illusion of a solved army. For almost 50 years, the Terracotta Army was treated as an open book.
This is the Terracotta Army. 8,000 warriors buried over 2,000 years ago. One of the greatest wonders of the world.
From the moment farmers struck clay fragments in Xi'an in 1974, the site became one of the most heavily studied archaeological zones in the world. By the early 2000s, most of the major figures had been uncovered, cataloged, preserved, and analyzed. The belief across the field was simple. The army had revealed its central story. What remained were broken pieces, technical conservation, and routine documentation. Few expected anything dramatic to appear again. The arrangement strengthened that confidence. Pit 1 held rows of foot soldiers arranged in clean lines. Pit 2 contained horses, riders, archers, and flank units. Pit 3 held a smaller group that many researchers identified as the command staff. Every excavation season confirmed this layout. Nothing suggested a missing layer or an unfamiliar rank. Museum guides and academic papers repeated a stable interpretation. The site was seen as complete. That mindset shaped global exhibitions. Visitors were told that the warriors had already been decoded, that the big shocks belonged to the past, and that the future of Xi'an was preservation rather than discovery. Yet beneath that confidence lay a record that did not fully cooperate. When scholars revisited the earliest excavation notes from the 1970s, they found brief mentions of officer ranks described in ancient texts, but absent among the clay figures. Some journals even listed incomplete formations where rows stopped abruptly or expected groupings dissolved into empty space. At the time, supervisors dismissed these discrepancies as excavation noise. The observations faded into storage boxes and were ignored for decades. The written record also raised unsettling questions. Ancient court histories describe elite battlefield commanders who were intended to accompany Qin Shi Huang in death. These commanders are referenced by roll and honorific, but no statue matching their descriptions had ever been identified. Scholars who compared the records of the Grand Historian with the excavated army noticed a mismatch that never resolved. The tomb model did not line up with the hierarchy described in the imperial texts. More inconsistencies appeared in unexpected places. In the 1980s, a set of Qin maps and administrative charts showed symbols for units or offices not represented in any pit. According to researchers who studied them, these marks indicated organizational roles missing from the terracotta formations. Local oral traditions went further. Residents in the Lintong district spoke about a silent general, whose name was removed from later histories. These stories were incomplete and often whispered, but they resurfaced whenever the question of missing commanders came up. Individually, none of these inconsistencies were enough to challenge the standard story. But together they created a growing sense that the Terracotta Army was not as complete as everyone believed. They pointed toward something outside the mapped pits, something that had not been acknowledged, something that might have been buried deeper than anyone realized. That quiet tension sat unresolved for years. Then at the end of 2024, an unexpected disturbance surfaced inside Pit 2. and for the first time in decades, the illusion of a solved army began to crack. The first physical disturbance. The shift began as a minor note in the daily log. During a routine stability check in Pit 2, technicians recorded a patch of soil that did not behave like the ground around it.
The reason we're really interested in creating these 3D models is purely for analytical purposes. That is, we want to compare the shapes of different terracotta warrior heads.
What should have been a uniform layer showed an unusual difference in density in one isolated quadrant. At first, it read like a maintenance problem. Then the acoustic team ran quick vibration tests to check for tunnels or settling. The results were not routine. The ground produced odd echoes and uneven vibrations when struck, suggesting there was empty space beneath the surface rather than solid, packed earth. That was the moment the site became unusually quiet. Supervisors closed off the area and instructed the team to stop all movement around the disturbed section. Workers who had spent years in the pits said the area felt different, although they could not explain why. According to several crew members, basic metal tools began bending or malfunctioning when they were used near the spot. The fact that these tools worked normally in other areas made the sudden failures unsettling. The incidents were recorded in the daily logs, and supervisors increased restrictions, but no one could yet identify what had caused the disturbance. Small finds began turning up that complicated the story. Fragments of armor were recovered close to the anomaly. Specialists examined the pieces and reported that their shapes and decorative patterns did not match the standard designs catalogued for infantry or cavalry units. Instead of fitting any familiar category, the fragments suggested a style not represented anywhere else in the known pits. Alongside the armor shards, pieces of broken floor tiles showed clay patterning and tool marks inconsistent with any workshop tradition previously identified at the site. These mismatches hinted at a different production method or a missing workshop style no archive had yet recorded. A discarded note from the 1990s resurfaced in the team's records at this point. An early field diary had casually mentioned a possible hollow beneath a row of horse pits. At the time, the comment had been filed away as an odd observation. According to senior archaeologists who reviewed that notebook, it now read like a missed clue that should have been investigated further. The resurfaced note suddenly made the current disturbance feel less like a fresh anomaly and more like a long overlooked fault line in the excavation record. Then there were the pottery fragments. Small shards collected in the disturbed quadrant bore markings associated with high-ranking Qin officials. The symbols were subtle. Some believed that they were administrative marks. No comparable markings had ever been found near ordinary soldier figures. Their presence near this anomaly raised a difficult question. Why would artifacts linked to elite status appear where no elite figure had ever been recorded? The team concluded that the disturbance could indicate something constructed or intentionally sealed. For the first time in decades, the idea that the terracotta complex might hide a deeper, organized layer moved from speculation into serious field concern. Once the field teams confirmed the anomaly could not be ignored, researchers decided to bring in scientific instruments capable of seeing beneath the Earth. The hidden pattern beneath Pit 2. The first sweep used high-resolution ground-penetrating radar. As the antenna moved across the surface, the radar returned the same sharp echo again and again from a single point beneath the soil. When the technicians processed the data, a rectangular outline appeared on the screen. The edges were straight, the corners were clean, and the proportions were too precise to match any natural cavity. One of the technicians stared at the display and said quietly, "This cannot be real." The symmetry left little room for debate. Whatever lay below had been shaped by human hands, not formed by chance. To verify the result, supervisors approved a second test using muon imaging. This method measures how cosmic particles pass through the ground and reveals what they strike beneath the surface. When the muon maps finished rendering, the team froze. The particle shadows outlined a chamber-shaped depression under the radar rectangle. The walls showed almost identical thickness on every side. According to the scientists handling the data, that level of uniformity was a strong indicator of engineered architecture. Natural caves do not form clean angles or repeated wall measurements. This looked deliberate. Once the two data sets aligned, the atmosphere around Pit 2 changed. Some field leaders pushed for immediate excavation, convinced the readings revealed a sealed structure built during the Qin era. Others urged caution. A few argued that the chamber might contain unstable soil or structural weaknesses created during an ancient collapse. There were even quiet disagreements over whether the findings should be shared publicly before further checks. In internal meetings, researchers debated whether the readings pointed to a leadership chamber, a storage section, or something not seen anywhere else in the complex. As the discussions continued, attention turned to the surface material around the anomaly. Conservation experts examining exposed fragments found small traces of lacquer normally used on higher status figures. The pigments did not appear in ordinary soldier clusters. This detail deepened the suspicion that the chamber below was linked to individuals of elevated rank. The fragments did not prove anything by themselves, but they supported the possibility that the sealed structure held figures outside the known hierarchy. The combined results changed the direction of the excavation. The findings were strong enough that no one could dismiss them as technical error. The rectangular outline from the radar, the chamber shadow from the Muon scan, and the high-status pigments on surface fragments all pointed to the same conclusion. There was something below the collapse that did not match any known section of the Army. With these results confirmed, the team prepared a controlled plan to lift the uppermost layer and expose the first physical traces of what they had detected beneath Pit 2. Beneath the collapse. The first sign that this section was different appeared the moment the soil was lifted. A dark fluid leaked through a thin crack in the sediment and spread slowly across the trench floor. Workers stepped back immediately. The substance was black, thick, and carried a strong acidic smell. Field tests showed that it contained trace minerals that do not occur in the natural soil around Xi'an. According to several geochemical consultants, the mixture looked processed rather than naturally formed, although no one could agree on its exact purpose. The unexpected fluid caused disagreement among the researchers. Some believed it was placed there to keep intruders away by creating a hazardous barrier. Others argued that it may have been a preservation method designed to slow decay inside a sealed space. A few proposed that the mixture might have leaked from a container hidden inside the chamber. None of the explanations settled the matter, and supervisors paused the excavation until protective equipment was brought in. When digging resumed, the team uncovered a second unusual detail. Along a narrow line beneath the collapsed layer, they found mineral clusters containing an element not found anywhere else in the region. Geologists identified it as a material known from ancient metallurgical sites far from Xi'an. Its presence suggested that materials from distant locations were deliberately brought into this chamber. This raised new questions about why this specific location required substances not used anywhere else in the mausoleum. The excavation slowed as the team documented each finding. Then a small bronze piece emerged from the compressed soil. The fragment was thick and preserved enough for its markings to be clear. Engraved around the edge were repeating X symbols, each one small and evenly spaced. Conservators stated that these markings do not appear on any other artifact found in the Terracotta complex. Some specialists suggested that they could represent an internal identification code used for a particular rank or group. Others believed the marks might indicate a specific workshop or unit that has never been recorded in the excavation archives. These findings changed the direction of the dig. The acidic fluid, the imported mineral element, and the marked bronze fragment all pointed to a section of the mausoleum that operated under rules separate from the known pits. Only one sealed layer remained above the main feature inside this chamber. Once that final layer was removed, the identity of what had been placed here would finally come into view. A Terracotta Army commander unlike anything ever found. When the soil cleared, every voice in the chamber stopped. There, standing upright in a narrow pocket of untouched earth, was a single clay figure positioned apart from everything else around it. He was taller than the infantry statues, and carried a presence that stopped movement across the trench. Workers who had been at Xi'an since the early years said the room felt charged. the same shock they remembered when the first warriors surfaced in the 1970s. The armor revealed the reason. It was unlike any plate recorded in 50 years of excavation. Instead of flat surfaces, the chest and shoulders were built with raised ridges that formed sharp, controlled spikes along the upper plates. The surface was covered with a repeating pattern of engraved X symbols, each one carefully carved and aligned across the armor in continuous rows. Conservators stated that this pattern has never been found on any terracotta soldier. The arrangement looked deliberate, almost coded, as if each X represented a classification or internal identifier for a specialized unit. His stance made the reaction stronger. His right arm was lifted with the palm angled forward, not in a strike, but in a commanding halt. The figure looked as if he was stopping a formation or issuing a direct order. No other terracotta figure holds this pose. The posture alone signaled rank and authority far above the standard officers found in Pit 3. The hairstyle pushed the interpretation even further. His hair was tied high and held in a sculpted knot that matched rare descriptions in administrative notes about a protector who served directly under the emperor. The knot was reinforced with a carved band, a detail not used for common generals. Some scholars later said this feature resembled the style associated with a royal guard commander. The evidence is still debated, but the visual match was strong enough to raise immediate discussion on site. Then there were the eyes. They were carved with a depth and intensity that none of the team had seen before. The brows were angled sharply and the pupils were cut so deep that shadows collected inside them under the lights. Several workers said the expression looked fierce, almost confrontational. It did not resemble the calm or neutral expressions of the standard warriors. Instead, it carried an assertive energy that suggested a figure meant to intimidate or command. Pigment traces added another layer. Small patches of red and dark green clung to the folds of the armor. These colors are associated with elite units described in a short list of military divisions from the Qin era. Conservators noted that such pigments have only been found on high-status figures and ceremonial pieces. Toolmark analysis confirmed the impression. The carving showed refined technique and unusually precise cuts. Multiple specialists concluded that this figure came from a dedicated workshop, one reserved for high-ranking representations. Nothing about the craftsmanship matched mass production. Soil evidence closed the gap in interpretation. Chemistry showed that the statue had been placed inside a sealed microchamber before a collapse event forced it downward into the layer above. The preservation pattern was clear. Someone had isolated this figure intentionally. By the time the documentation was complete, the conclusion was unavoidable. This was a commander of exceptional rank. His armor, his stance, his markings, his expression, and his isolated burial all pointed to a role that does not appear in any official Qin records. The room shifted from awe to quiet alarm. If a figure of this rank had been buried out of sight, then the chamber itself might not have been the final secret. And as the team inspected the floor beneath his platform, they realized the structure was not finished. The deeper chamber. The moment the commander's chamber was stabilized, the team noticed something troubling beneath his platform. A thin fracture ran along the tiles as if the floor had been built over another space. Structural scans confirmed a clear gap below the stonework. That single reading changed the tone in the pit. What was supposed to be the final chamber suddenly looked like a doorway. According to several supervisors, the real fear came from the implication. If the structure had more levels, then the planners of the mausoleum had designed a far more complex system than anyone had ever proposed. After days of reinforcement work, the first row of tiles was lifted. A square opening appeared. Cool air drifted upward. When the team lowered lights into the darkness, the beam caught rows of metal shapes standing against the wall. It took the archaeologists a few seconds to understand what they were seeing. They had uncovered a hidden armory. The room held real bronze weapons resting on racks that had remained upright for more than 2,000 years. These were not ceremonial copies. They were full combat tools. The first pieces lifted out were long bronze swords. Their surfaces showed no signs of heavy corrosion. Their edges remained sharp enough that staff members handling them wore reinforced gloves. Metallurgists who examined the swords explained that the alloy mixture was unlike the standard chin blades found in the main pits. The metal included trace elements not documented in any other site of the period. That detail alone sent a shock through the tent where the first test results were announced. It meant the Qin state may have used specialized metallurgical practices that had never appeared in any historical record. Halberds came next. They had elongated blades with an unusual curved extension that matched no known Qin design. The shape suggested a different fighting style, possibly connected to a unit trained separately from the regular army. Crossbows rested beside them. Many showed trigger assemblies with complex interlocking parts. One archaeologist admitted openly that the mechanism looked far ahead of anything expected from the 3rd century BCE. The discovery created a wave of anxiety in the room. It suggested that the Qin arsenal had included innovations that historians had never suspected. Spears and dagger axes followed. Their shafts were gone, but the bronze heads remained perfectly preserved. What unsettled the specialists was their craftsmanship. None of the pieces matched the standardized military models described in Qin records. The team had expected the weapons of a high-ranking individual to be well made. They had not expected to find designs completely unknown to Chinese archaeology. Then the most alarming details surfaced. Every weapon carried the same marking, a sharp, deliberate X carved in identical proportion across each piece. The symbol appeared on the sword blades, on the halberd sockets, near the crossbow triggers, and even beside the decorative ridges of the dagger axes. The repetition was too precise to be decorative. Some researchers argued that the X indicated ownership and that all these weapons belonged to the commander above. Others believed the X represented a restricted military division, possibly an elite strike group not recorded in surviving texts. A smaller group proposed a more unsettling idea. They suggested the X might have been the commander's designation or command identity, one intentionally removed from later histories due to political conflict inside the court. The find forced scholars to reconsider the structure of Qin power. Until this moment, the Terracotta Army had been seen as a symbolic model of military order. The discovery of the hidden armory suggested something else. It hinted at a hierarchy behind the hierarchy. It pointed to specialized units, advanced craftsmanship, and internal ranks that were never written in the Han histories that shaped modern understanding of the Qin dynasty. If an elite military order existed under the first emperor and was buried with such secrecy, then the official version of Chinese ancient warfare was incomplete. The deeper chamber rewrote what experts thought they knew. It proved the Qin did more than unify China. They developed military divisions and technologies that were hidden from the world for 2,000 years. As the chamber was sealed again for preservation, the team left with a question that none of them could answer. If these weapons belonged to a commander powerful enough to receive his own underground armory, what else did Qin Shi Huang hide that we have still not uncovered? If this discovery shocked you as much as it shocked the experts, hit like and subscribe.